20 September 2022, Saquarema City, Rio de Janeiro State, National State, Brazil. The first issues was presented at Rio de Janeiro City, and at that time we nominated that moment as the day in court, which is the idea presented at that time. Three groups of accusation in that indeed belongs to a complex scam observing crimes, I would say. The second part we could have today, and we will only make a review. The first thing we must have in mind that the antitrust justice is an euphemism for the anti-mafia justice in USA. The second thing we maybe must have on mind is that the trust will impact the consumership, and obviously will impact this in diffuse areas and interests. For instance, the trust scam as the relation between public corruption and corporate corruption, violating my data, my effort, and isso is on it very clear, exposed as industrial secrets or core business, and obviously that I will avoid, for instance, the provider of communication. And if this goes all the time, I will avoid the sector as communication, or the segment, for instance, the provider as cable, internet, or something like this. In the same way, at the stores, if I have the purchase of a suite, or a t-shirt, and comes with problems like a hole or something like this, is something used or something new, it doesn't matter, from Brazil or from United States. Of course that you maybe avoid the e-commerce. I will try to have the purchase at the store. The trust will impact this in the same way, and as you can observe, it will modify my behavior as consumer and will impact my expectations as economic agent. This can go in all areas, even in the election. In the same way, we could observe that in America we had the relation as dialogue between the Democratic as political parties and the Republicans as political parties. And since we have in mind the movement and the history since 1929, considering 1920, consider the crack in 1999, and have great wars, and at that time the America could support their campaign as military campaign, offering public bonds. The Americans, Native Americans, had a purchase of that, and then they had the payback or something like this. And America doesn't have the huge problem as tax evasion in the way we are having present time. And in the same way, nowadays, if you use this to sustain a military campaign by public bonds offered, of course that maybe you will flunk, and you will flunk in a terrible way, because you will have the offer as bound, and you have real economic groups acting in America by the coalition between public and corporate area. And this is the idea of trust. They will assume the legitimacy to claim that bound and change the behavior, even as your defensive system, which was complained with the American State Department, Intelligence, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and others. We have, in the same way, the perception that I have my communication regular as something that I will request an information, and this information will be delivered to me, and this is the idea as circuit as communication, very straight, but sometimes I have failures, you know and sometimes I will have those failure, those spaces as fail filled by something like this, setting the idea as interval, and this was the sense that we have as connection, and then we will have the failure on it as interconnection. Going, for instance, as a global company or the American conjuncture, we have the hyperconnection, when this big data as cluster of information will be interconnected with your global system. We had this in a very first piece of our conversation during the day. We could observe that this process as communication indeed will allow us to understand how the relation between different things got, very similar by when you abandon the essence of difference between two both indeed by the same kind of need, and this can be presented as something like this: the duplicity of two both as an extended field of activity. And of course that we are considering here in a very first moment the Republicans and the Democrats. Here we have the failed Republicans, the failed Democrats. The integration of them will give the Republicans and Democrats failed inside the spectral field that has only two groups of interest, but nowadays having this new one, which is the third way. The first area when we had this speech on America was the Fed, the Federal Reserve of United States, which indeed is something that lead to the use of American resource. In general, the transference go by politics or stimulus or others, specific chairs, decisions from the top, pattern of association by dependence, collinear association by dependence. And if you control the stimulus at the dependence, you control the destiny of a huge part of two political parties. In USA, considering the integration of two both, you can even control the electoral result, not considering the chairs occupied and the system of justice. The system of justice was created on 1789, and it's the division of power as the Congress, the government, and the judicial system. The judicial system is that area that you will, face and be at the struggle to protect the Constitution, and of course the basic rights and guarantees. If I couldn't have all this, presented and accepted in Brazil and have this in America, my citizenship got, entirely satisfied as expectation in United States, despite I do not had born in America. In the same way, we will observe that this frustrated expectation is the same frustrated expectation as I had at the consumer. Then we could observe that the civil society organized in the United States since 1929 do not get along with the crackdown as alcoholic beverage, creating the anonymous alcoholics and the alcoholics, and in the same way at the narcotics, the anonymous narcotics. The society organized offered the solution for this society that indeed had expectations frustrated by the kind of dominance and trends that are leading this nation. We will observe that this is very important, and it's based on the freedom, which is a bless and something that the American Constitution protect very very much. And when you strike this, of course that you will strike the angle stone of all this. By threats and fear, this society wouldn't have the anonymous narcotics and the anonymous alcoholics, and of course that you have the dependence as collinear is something very with a huge density at this collinear dependence between two political parties, and instead have the dominance of two fields inside them to both as political parties. You indeed will have the dominance as this entire nation, and you have a book on it. You can research on Amazon, eBay, whatever. Name it, head cocaine. How you will disorganize the Western society by drug dependence, the infiltration on social circles and things like this. And this is much more when you have the power of investigation and offer proofs, and do this even as lawfare and judicial decisions made for intimidation, for threat, and the use of state power for annihilation of a citizen, an individual, a consumer, a company, or having the misperception about the state. And we had this observed, for instance, if you have a terror group that has sometimes the right to claim things, but this right got down and have lost as legitimate by the ways these things got claimed. And if this terror group do not act, they can't be blamed or under the punishment by things that indeed they didn't have the action, but they scapegoat things, put things in a big mess. And of course that the state, the entrust at the judicial system and all things can go, for instance, not only at terror, but in all situations that create this kind of diffuse threat, protect or having the crime and advantage and crime results, and having all this protected by the obstruction, by the misuse of chairs, and institutional powers, as institutional failure always goes inside institutions segmented by failures within connection and dialogue based on corruption, and sometimes the interconnection by gains. And this is something that we are living on present time. You can't say that I'm telling a lie or a big crap. This is our review, and we are advancing for the next moment. We will interrupt here and move forward.